Alrighty, hello and welcome back to another Interp series lecture video. My name is Xavier Liu. I'm one of the Interp coaches at Bellarmine College Prep, and today our video will be an introduction to duo interpretation, or duo. It's one of my all-time favorite events, so let's get started. So first of all, what is duo? Some event basics for you. The goal of duo is making literature come to life with two performers. Duo is the only event, the only speech event that has two individuals performing together. So it's the only partnered event in speech, unlike the other ones that are just one person performing. Duos can be humorous, dramatic, or have a combination of two. We've found out at most tournaments that going full dramatic or having drama and humor usually those speeches usually do a little bit better than full-on humorous speeches. However, if you choose to do a full-on humor speech, you can totally do well. It just requires a lot of technical skill, a lot of blocking, and a lot of good characterization. And like I just mentioned, in the speech in a duo, you're going to have multiple characters, and depending on whether your speech is humorous, dramatic, or both, you're either going to use popping, which is rapidly changing your body position using movements of your feet and your body to denote character changes, or morphing, which is a slower sort of motion to change from character A to perhaps character B. So either way, in a duo, you're expected to have at least two and or more characters in your speech. There's an offstage focus in duo interpretation, as there is in a lot of the interp speeches. Particularly in duo interpretation, you're not allowed to have eye contact or direct eye contact, so you're not allowed to stare another individual in the eye. You're also not allowed to physically touch your partner. So, for example, if you are going to give your partner a handshake in one scene, you're not allowed to physically touch them. And you're not allowed to have any props. And then last but not least, with duo interpretation, the speech will focus on the relationship and interaction between your characters. Because there are two of you performing, a lot of a speech is going to be about how character A and character B interact and work together to create the scene. So, for example, if this was a speech all about two brothers getting into a fight, right? Brother A and brother B would be seen talking to each other. Their words could get very tense and very intense, and then perhaps one takes a swing at another, right? And so we would perhaps have a fight scene, and this would show that the relationship and the interaction between characters is a bit terse, is a bit tense right now. There are high stakes and high emotions involved. So that's an example of what perhaps a duo would look like. So what do we look for when finding a script for duo? First, you're allowed to use any published material, so books, plays, movies, TV show scripts. You also want to be sort of looking for a dramatic plot structure. So like you learned in your English class, that's something that along the lines of some sort of introduction or teaser, some sort of exposition where you describe the characters or describe the main characters in your speech, then some sort of rising action, or some sort of inciting incident that leads to a rising action. So the inciting incident is sort of the problem where the problem first gets introduced. And then rising action is where there are a series of events that perhaps lead from the problem into the climax, which is the most intense part of a speech. Afterwards, you will have a falling action before finally hitting the denouement, and then the resolution, which is the end of the speech. Vignettes, which are sort of short stories, those are also okay, though maybe a bit hard to understand. We'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about the structure of a duo and how to sort of cut your duo. So hold on to any thoughts about vignettes and the dramatic plot structure for now. You want to be looking generally for a balance of humor and drama, right? If you're leaning more towards a completely humorous speech, you want those area, or you want areas where you can add in and spice in your speech, either through funny lines or jokes, as well as perhaps some like action-filled scenes where you can add some drama in. So perhaps a couple fight scenes, perhaps like funny, humorous transitions. Transitions are super important in Duo, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this lecture. Um, if you're moving towards a more dramatic speech, you want to make sure that you still have a little bit of humor. You want to have a little bit of funny lines, things that make people laugh at the top of your speech, so that when you get into the dramatic moments of a speech, or when you get into the drama, it's not this huge drag that folks think that they've just been pulled into 10 minutes of pure drama. You want to give folks a little light laugh at the beginning, and then slowly move into the more dramatic parts of your speech. If you're looking for a blend in both, so humor and drama, or a humorous speech and a dramatic speech, make sure that your humor and your drama is balanced, right? What you want to try to avoid is something that's just completely funny or something that's just completely dramatic. You want a nice, good balance of both. As I mentioned in the humorous Interp video, you want to make sure that your scripts are easy to understand and relatable. Again, Sherwin and I use this term stupidly relatable. Again, a lot of your judges are going to be English second language judges, or ESL judges. A lot of parents are also going to be your judges. Those parents are usually 35 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus years old. So again, what may be clear to you and what you may think is super funny may not be funny at all to a 45-year-old Chinese man at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so we want to make sure that when we're looking for your speech, you find something that's very easy to understand, almost stupidly easy to understand for anyone of any age group and any age range, and also very relatable. What you want to sort of avoid is convoluted story plots. You want to avoid, dramatic plot structures that are confusing to understand, so that your judge isn't confused during your actual speech. You want to be also looking for solid characters and effective dialogue. Solid characters. Those characters characters initially are going to be introduced at the very beginning of your speech. By the end of your speech, we want to have learned something about them. So whether that's, them developing over time, or, understanding something over time, right? We want to make sure that characters are developed and built upon from the beginning of a speech to the end of a speech. To get to this, or to develop your character, you want to make sure that you have effective dialogue. Effective dialogue helps move the plot along and helps you build your characters throughout your speech. And then last but not least, you want to be looking for places with good blocking and good tech. Blocking is sort of creating the environment of your speech. So for example, if your speech takes place in a cabin in the woods, you want to make sure that that cabin is very clearly depicted through your offstage focus. So for example, if there's a bed in the cabin, if there's a desk, if there's a kitchen, et cetera, you want to make sure that's very clear. You want to, plot out your space such that, the audience and the judge knows exactly where you're at and knows exactly where this entire scene is taking place. You also want to be looking for places where you can add good tech. That is essentially like, any fight scenes that you can put in, any clean blocking that we can sort of add in that spices the speech up, makes things a lot more interesting to look at. How can we transition between scenes, right? Do we use a noise transition? So do we sing a little tune and then move from scene A to scene B? Do we instead, use a 180-degree turn to signify, a transition, et cetera. You want to be looking for places where we can add those cool and creative blocking ideas into your speech. A couple rules for duo interpretation. So you need to have a new script every year. You're not allowed to reuse a script over and over again. Your source should be printed, published, and single sourced. What I mean by single sourced is that you can't combine certain speeches together. So, for example, if you really liked one book and you really liked another book, you can't combine them into one single script. You're also not allowed to combine two episodes from like your favorite TV series. So, for example, if you wanted to do Brooklyn Nine-Nine as a duo, you can't combine the pilot episode and the second episode. You would have to choose one of them. This is also the only speech event with two people competing together as a team. Every other event only has one person competing. You also are required to write a written introduction. The introduction usually comes about a minute to a minute and a half in at the very top of your speech that introduces the speech, so tells to the audience and the judge what the speech is about, as well as the title and the author of a speech. You're also not allowed to add more than 150 added words, which also includes the written introduction in your speech. These 150 added words are added to help you transition from one scene to the next. Makes things a little bit easier. Next, you need to make sure that you have balance cutting in your speech. What I mean by this is that you want your lines balanced in between partners. You don't want one character or one individual taking like 75% of the lines while you only have 25%. And vice versa, right? So you don't want to have like 75% of the lines and your partner only have 25. You want to make sure that the cutting is balanced. Next, the speech must be memorized. The speech must also be no more than 10 minutes. And then last but not least, and again, like I said and mentioned earlier in this lecture, there's an offstage focus. You can't have any direct eye contact with your partner. You can't touch each other, and there are no props. Several important tips about choosing a partner. Make sure that you choose a partner who can that you can communicate well with, that you can practice frequently with, that you can brainstorm often with. A lot of times in duo, we will try something out, it will not work, and then we're back to the drawing board. You want to be able to have a partner that is able to is able to communicate with you, as well as make sure that you are able to brainstorm new ideas with if those ideas that we first started off with did not work. And then go on to practice those ideas once you come up with them, right? You also want a partner who you can work out differences with, right? As someone who competed in duo myself, there were lots of times in which my partner and I really butted heads with each other. Make sure you have someone and choose a partner that you can sit down and talk things through, as well as work out your differences, right? If you just keep on butting heads with each other and the sparks keep on flying, that is not a good partnership. You also want to choose a partner that you can focus, work hard with, and work well with. If you are going to choose a partner that all y'all are going to be doing is like fooling around when you were supposed to be brainstorming or practicing and just goofing off, that won't be a strong duo. And the reason for that is because no one is pushing each other. No one is actually doing the work that needs to get done. So you need to make sure that you choose a partner that you can focus with, work hard with, and work well with. And then last but not least, you need to be choosing a partner that can challenge you and push you towards success, right? This is a team event. This is not, I go do my thing and you go do your thing. You need to work together and work hard to push yourself and to challenge yourself to get those good ranks in that round. Okay? Really important note. Just because you are friends doesn't mean that you are automatically very good duo partners, right? You don't necessarily want to be choosing your duo partner as a friend because even though you may communicate well with them, they may, be your best buddy, that may not work out in the end because they may not be able to practice well with you. You may not be able to, like focus together, right? If you find yourself goofing off when you're supposed to be practicing, that then that duo is not going to be able to succeed because you need to make sure that you practice, practice, and practice. Okay, so make sure that you choose a partner that you can really work well with and really communicate well with, because that duo partnership is going to be really, really strong if you do choose a partner that you can really, really push yourself with. Alrighty, structure of a duo. So we're going to be focusing on the dramatic plot structure. And then moving on to the vignette sort of plot structure. So in a dramatic plot structure for a duo, what will happen is you'll have a teaser that is around 45 seconds to a minute and a half. That'll first introduce your characters, introduce what's going on, probably introduce a setting of your speech. Then you're going to have your intro. And like I said, the intro is just a part of a speech where you introduce what the speech is about, the title of a speech, as well as the author of a speech. Afterwards, you will have an exposition. The exposition is where you sort of explain more about your characters. So you explain who the characters are, the backgrounds of the characters, as well as you're sort of setting up the speech to sort of take hold. Then you move on to your inciting incident. The inciting incident is the sort of introduction of the problem or the main issue that you're tackling with your speech, which then leads you to the rising action. Okay, so this is like a series of scenes that or is an effect or is caused from the inciting incident that builds towards your climax, which is the most intense, most exciting part of the speech, before you start falling down with one or two scenes in the falling action, which is sort of bringing the energy back down from the climax, and then into the resolution, which is the end of your speech. With a vignette plot structure, like vignette, as I mentioned, are short stories, you're still going to have a teaser, still going to be 45 seconds to a minute and a half. You're still going to have an intro, which is around 30 seconds to a minute, again, telling the audience what the speech is about, as well as the title and author of your speech. Afterwards, you're going to have an expository first story. Now, before the expository first story, you will have some sort of narration that leads you into the expository first story. So with a vignette plot structure for a duo, you want to be having narrative or narration before each short story, okay? And again, after the expository first story, which sort of explains, who the characters are, what the speech is about, you will move on to the second story. And before that, you're going to have some sort of narration. And usually the second story is some sort of inciting incident. So again, introducing the problem in your speech. Then you will also have some sort of narration down over here before moving on to the rising action, which is your third story, before having some narration again, and then the climactic fourth story, and then more narration, the falling action, which is the fifth story, and then again some sort of narration into the resolution and the closing portion of the speech. So what skills are needed for duo interpretation? First of all, cutting. Having a story, having a connection, piecing things together, being able to piece a story, a coherent story together is super important, right? I talked about being almost stupidly relatable and easy to understand. That's super key and super important with a duo. You need to have emotional control and intensity, facial expressions, emotional portrayal. All that is super duper important for making sure that your characters stand out and that your characters are interesting to look at and interact with each other, right? Especially when you get into the rising action, the climax, as well as the falling action, as well as the inciting incident. You want to have and make sure that your characters are totally in line and working together to make sure that you have those areas of emotional control, of emotional intensity, an emotional portrayal in your speech. Blocking tech. Again, blocking is where you create the surroundings of your speech, right? Or surrounding of your scene. Duo is fast, tight, and it's clean. Especially for those humorous speeches, you need to be fast, you need to be tight, and you need to be clean. What's very clear in duo is when you go up there and you watch a very bad duo, you can see that their blocking tech is not strong, that hand gestures, that movements are sloppy, they're not tight, they're not condensed together, they're not clean at all. You can really tell that with the two partners. So you need to make sure for a good duo that you are working with your partner to make sure that you're solidifying and polishing every little movement, every little step, every little facial expression and emotional reaction. Synchronization, that's also super key with duo. What's really impressive in duo is when you have blind blocking or really close blocking that is in sync. Because there are two of you, blind blocking essentially just means when one person physically cannot see the other, but are still like mimicking or reacting to the hand motions or hand gestures. So for example, if you have one person completely back to back, or when you have two partners that are back to back to each other, you can't see each other, but if your hand gestures and your movements are exactly in sync with each other, that's super impressive, right? The other thing is like if you're including, fight scenes, or you're including, some sort of like action sort of scene. If you have fight scenes that are in sync, or you have good blocking tech there, that's going to one up your piece, and allow a judge to give you that extra bump in your ranking because it looks so good. Reactions to each other, also super duper important, right? When one character says something, the other person needs to react. So for example, if character A talks about, oh my gosh, like this was the most disgusting sandwich I've ever eaten, and person B is the chef and overhears this, right? That chef will react, or person B will react to what person A is saying, perhaps like march out of the kitchen with like, a knife and like, almost stab character A in their hand, right? So characters need to be reacting to each other. And since you have two folks, you have two people interacting in a duo, that's especially important. Next, cleanliness, especially with blocking, popping, morphing, and transitions in your duo. You need to make sure that you are super clean, that every little thing that you're doing, you're not adding any extraneous movements, that you are fast, you're tight, and that you're, really honed in on your actions and every little movement that you're taking. And then last but not least, characterization. It's super duper important that your characters again develop from the beginning of a speech to the end of your speech. So you need to make sure that once you start speaking as that specific character, that you're really embodying that character in its utmost form, right? So you need to make sure that if you're portraying an ancient tribes person, that you're really, really embodying that character to the fullest extent. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask your junior or your senior captains. Your peers are also a great resource for you to turn to, as well as your coach, which is me. But yeah, that's it for this video, and we'll see you next time.